Not too long ago, I did a video talking about pandemic billionaires. And this article talks about ten billionaires who reap 400 billion boost to wealth during the pandemic. Now, of course, to some extent, some of this was basically the government picking and choosing who was going to become wealthy and who basically was going to go broke. But if you were smart and you saw ahead what the government was doing, you might have been a little smarter and say, you know what, I'm going to switch things up. I'm going to focus on, if you were a restaurant, maybe you were thinking, you know what, I'm going to do without this real estate and I'm going to go buy a food truck. Unfortunately, we'd have to cut some of the staff, but at the very least, now that gave you a little bit of mobility. People, of course, are still going to eat. There's still going to be individuals who are going to need to eat. Maybe they're in a particular area, maybe where you were dried up, but there were other areas where if you could relocate, you might have had the opportunity, of course, to reap some of the money that was out there. And the reality is that there's quite a bit of money that's out there for those who are interested. Even though we're in one of the harshest economic times that the country has faced, there are still out there, there's still opportunities out there for people who are hungry and who are looking, of course, to change their economic status. Especially if you already have a job, maybe there's opportunities to do overtime. Like, for example, for me, I work as a nurse, and during those time periods where people were afraid of the virus, there were many people who had the opportunity to do travel nursing. And some of these travel nurses were making money hand over fist for what we're learning right now is not too much of a disease to be worried about. Just saying. But of course, some of these people were making perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars from the stories that I were told for other travel nurses. Some of them, within the span of just a couple of months, were making a whole year's salary. And so if you kept yourself busy throughout that whole time, maybe you picked up one contract and you set it up so that you could work X amount of days, and then maybe you were doubling up and doing another contract over here, or maybe you were picking up some extra days on the side, and basically you could have been cleaning up. For me, myself, I've chosen to do extra hours when possible. At the hospital, I pick up extra overtime, but then of course I take all that money that I do make, and then of course I invest it. I not only invest it into the stock market, whether it's for a short term, I do some swing trading, but then I also have long-term investments that I basically pour all that money in, so that now the money that I have is basically making me money as well. As I say, my money is earning me money. And that's basically what most people need to do, but unfortunately most are not, and as a result many will struggle. And this is typically what wealthy individuals do. Talking to a lot of the men out there, especially nowadays, we hear that a lot of people, a lot of women refer, say men ain't shit, and that men are lazy, they just play video games, etc. But when you actually do a little bit of research, if you actually Google the number of hours that you see, especially young men who are in 16, 17, 18, or men who are a little bit older in their early 20s, typically play about 10 or maybe even 14 hours a week, just when it comes to things of video games. And of course, some play even longer. Now, of course, if you have the goal of being maybe a YouTuber, or if you're on Twitch or you want to create a website, maybe your goal is to do like video game reviews, or maybe you're doing guides, tutorials, etc. Then of course, that's an avenue that you can go down, where now your hobby can be basically utilized to help earn you a living, right? Through ads. You can see these ads right here. So on this particular website where they generate news, they also have people who are willing to advertise on their websites because of the traffic, because the content is that good that people keep coming back, so that individuals want to put ad. And of course, if video games is your thing, you can do the exact same thing, and then people will want to place ads on your website, regardless of what you do, whether you do video games or maybe you're a nurse and you want to do some healthcare on the side. Maybe you want to do, for example, you want to start your own private aid, something that I did back in 2017. And of course, you can utilize your website, and maybe now hospitals or people who have like medications, etc., want to advertise on your website. So these are all things that, of course, that individuals could do, especially now during this period where there is quite a bit of opportunity. There's a lot of money that is being printed if you've been paying attention. And so that's what many of these individuals are doing, right? The Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musks of the world are basically on their grind. The reason that I talked about this is because, again, this scripture from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is a beautiful book that gives a lot of wisdom, and of course, it's written like a father giving advice to his son. And so the Proverbs 22:29, it says, "Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will be stationed in the presence of kings. He will not stand before obscure men." And of course, when you look at those individuals who are really good at what they do, right? You might think of basketball players, football players, baseball players, or musicians who are very good at what they do. Or you might look at a skilled carpenter or a skilled craftsman, right? The reason that they become so famous for what they do is because they've gotten good at what they do. And as a result of being so good at what they do, in essence, they are hailed before kings or the elite ones, right, of the system of things. And that is just the reality. The Bible acknowledges that, and it encourages you to be that, to be a skilled individual, which is why even when no one is looking, when you're working by yourself, and maybe your boss isn't around and no one is watching, the Bible says instead of doing it for that boss who you may perhaps not like, you might not like that job. The Bible says, in essence, do it whole souled, not to the person that you're working for, but as if you were doing it for the Lord himself, as if you, whatever it is that you were doing, you were going to present to him. And of course, you would want him to find you favorable for what you're offering to him. Now, of course, the reason that I bring this up is I was actually watching this video last night when I was at the hospital. I had a little bit of downtime during my break, and this is dated January 28th, 2021. And of course, the title is, "Despite Rising Salaries, the Skilled Labor Shortage is Getting Worse." And so this is a wonderful opportunity for a lot of men out there who are not sure where they want to see themselves. Typically, blue collar work is, especially nowadays, perhaps by the ladies, is looked down on. But I'm gonna let this video play. It's gonna be about 7 minutes. And of course, they do add a lot of information in this video that is beneficial for a lot of men. We're going to take a look at it, and this is primarily revolving around things like plumbing, electrical, of the like. All right, we're going to take a look at that right now.
There is a shortage of skilled tradespeople throughout the U.S. economy, a persistent problem that started well before the pandemic. But given high unemployment, it is an important time to explore what's behind that gap and what can be done about it. Paul Solomon has a story for our series, Work Shift, which focuses on navigating the job market in a post-COVID economy.
Superstar Seattle, where the high-tech young make 6 figures and up.
Okay, going in.
But you can make that much in low-tech too, says plumber Vinny Spazzari.
Drain cleaning, light plumbing repairs, and that kind of thing. We've got guys making over $100,000 a year.
Spazzari owns Seattle's Mr. Rooter franchise.
I've got plumbers that work for me today that make $200,000 plus a year.
And they're what age?
Any age, in their 30s, 40s.
Making $200,000 a year or more.
That is a lot of money for being a plumber. It's like, I'm in the wrong business. But for a lot of men out there, this is the reality, because most people spend so much of their time going to school, getting other people rich, right? You get the professors rich, you get the universities rich, people who make the books, and then you go out there try to get a job, and you're making peanuts. I think the average salary in America for a man is like $48,000 or $52,000. For minorities, it's like $42,000, $44,000.
Absolutely.
That's because there simply aren't enough plumbers. Not in boom towns like Seattle, not anywhere.
Manpower is one of the most frustrating parts of my job, filling all the spots. I could hire 6, 8 experienced plumbers right now.
But they're just not out there?
They're just not out there. Guys that are my age, they're aging out.
But why aren't they being replaced with the young, given their historically low labor participation rate, made worse by the pandemic?
Especially now, if you actually look at, especially for millennials, I think they said over 50% of all millennials were forced to move back home because just the prospects for them, at least according to what Wall Street would like you to believe, is that there's no prospects out there for you. If you're looking for those cushy tech jobs and you want to wear a blue shirt and a nice little tie and sit in an office, a lot of those jobs unfortunately disappear because they're not really all that necessary. But a lot of these jobs that they're referring to are typically ones that keep cities and economies running, and these jobs are always in demand.
There were all these kids who either aren't working at all or are working in dead-end, low-wage jobs. Why can't you just say to them, hey, by the age of 25 or 30, you can be making six figures. Just come with me.
I would love to. I've gone to some career days. You know, the kids, you're waiting for them to come talk to you, and they just don't.
So why no takers?
First and foremost is the perception of plumbing. Got the cutters right here.
Oh, yeah.
Trevor Caldwell is Vinny Spazzari's right-hand man.
There's this.
Did you hear that? Same point I made before, right? The right-hand man. He's basically, like I said, do you see a man skilled in his work? He will be stationed before kings. If this guy,
Stigma that goes
right,
along with.
he says that the other guy's his right-hand man,
Just a plumber.
right? That's his right-hand man, right? That means the owner of the business, Vinny, he's saying that he pays people, some of his plumbers, $200,000. How much do you think he's making?
Not a person, just a plumber. And I don't want to be that guy.
Or that gal.
You're doing manual labor. Some people tend to look down on that.
You even got the
And that makes
blue-haired
people not
feminist out
wanna
here.
Go into it, clearly.
Sarah Schnabel isn't a plumber, but an Ithaca, New York electrical apprentice.
Oh, there we go.
Another well-paying trade which can't find good help these days. A frustration for Schnabel's boss, Brian Lamort, and for his colleagues.
I know lots of guys in the trade who are contractors, and they're looking for help.
And willing to pay for it.
We've recently raised our rates as a business to $90 an hour, and we are not pushing the envelope.
Shoot, I remember when I started my own business. So foolish of me going back to nursing school. I mean, granted, with overtime, you're gonna make about that with OT. But I was making that at 17 when I ran my own business, and that was because I learned a skill very similar to this. I went into swimming pools. I learned jacuzzis. I learned hot tubs. I learned how to work with motors. I learned how to work with filter systems. I learned how to do installations, etc. And as a result, you basically get to call your own shot, especially, like I said, if you are skilled in your labor, if you know what you're doing and you put your mind to it, as they said here. And look at this jobbing. Look at the increase in the pay. They went from 65 to 75 to 90. But when you actually look out, you read this article, all it talks about is the stagflation, how wages have been stagnated for so long because most of those other jobs are so overly saturated that there's really no room. There's too many people out there that are looking for a lot of these cushy jobs working in tech. But a lot of these jobs where you're seeing, this is like a 12% raise. Going from 65 to 75 to 95, that's almost a 20% raise.
75 a little while ago and 65 a little while before that. It's getting to the point where you probably pay us more to come fix your light switch than you do to go to the doctor.
So again, why no takers?
I do think for people my age, it's definitely more glamorous to think of the tech job where you're in a really nice, cushy office building. We're the kind of people who are going to hire someone to go change a light bulb, let alone go into the trades. That's kind of where my generation is right now.
I can't give them a power tool. They may kill themselves with it. They never held a power tool in their life.
Yes, says Detroit master plumber Adrian Bennett, whose firm is currently helping to revitalize Michigan Central Station, it takes a non-cushy mindset.
This is physical work. You need to be there on a job site every day, and you got to be on time. And a lot of the young people today, they don't have work ethics.
And that's very true, and it's typically because many young people, especially in minorities, just don't have fathers. They don't have fathers to teach them the work ethic, and a lot of women nowadays, they just get propped up by the government. There's so many, like I said, I did a video a while back in the beginning of the pandemic showing for every 10 women who lost their job, and of course most of these were government jobs, for every 10 women who lost their job, one man in government lost his job. 10-to-1 ratio. And it just goes to show you that a lot of these women, because this is typically what the government wants to do, they don't want people being together and creating intact families. They want people separated, especially the women, since women make up the majority of the voters. And it's just, they give them these pseudo They give them these pseudo low-paying welfare jobs just so that they can depend upon them for the vote. They do the same thing with blacks and Hispanics in terms of minorities, so that they know that certain groups will, by nature, vote for them. And this is all done by design, right? Because they don't want strong, intact families where you become financially, where you're more financially free, or you can work towards being a business owner like this individual. Like I said, if he's paying people 100,000 and 200,000 a year as plumbers, you best believe he's making more than that.
But of course, plenty do. Determined to breed new plumbers, Vinny Spazzari runs his own year-long training program,
And then there's many options that you can provide.
paying young people from the get-go to learn the trade.
We're paying our trainees $15, $16, $18 an hour. And then when you're done with the program, you're not a full licensed plumber, but you're a service technician who's able to snake drains and to do the kind of small plumbing repairs and whatnot and get close to that six-figure income. You're getting paid to learn that.
After a certain number of hours and possibly an exam, the requirements vary by locality, you can become a licensed plumber, a quality credential in an economy where only 11% of employers think colleges and universities are doing a good job of preparing people for the workforce.
And that's huge, because especially now, college and universities, especially if you're a man going to college and you're not quite sure what you're doing, for the most part, as stated in the video, this is by PBS, for those, is by PBS NewsHour, which means that 90%, about 90% of the people who are hiring you don't really value the education that you've gotten at your university or your higher learning, because really they're not doing a good job at teaching people anything. So the moment you come out, you've got a whole bunch of debt. You wasted 4 years where you're not in the job market. You come out, you're maybe 22, 23, 24, 25, and you don't know nothing. And then they got to re-educate you all over again. So for many of these individuals, you can come out of high school at the age of 18, spend 4 or 5 years learning a trade, and then you're making six figures.
And everything before you hang that up there.
Says Spazzari of his apprenticeship program.
It's open for everybody. I would welcome anybody.
But says Spazzari,
You'd be amazed at how many people we want to hire, but our insurance company won't insure them because of driving violation, drugs, can't keep a job. You see some applicants come in here in a ripped t-shirt, hasn't shaved. You go out and look at his car and it's full of garbage. It hasn't been washed in a month. Those are the things we look at.
but hey,
So as they say, perception is important. Some people might think, oh, it's not fair. You shouldn't judge a person by how they look. But this is the real world, right? That whole left-sided agenda doesn't float well for employers who are looking for independable, or they're looking for people who can work independently and be dependable, right? As he said, you want to make sure these people are going to come on time. If you can't even maintain your beard, if you can't even, if your clothes, people look at you like you're homeless, if your car is full of junk, they're not going to look at you favorably as someone who they might think is skilled at their labor. They're going to think that you're just lazy and you're not worth hiring. They're not going to take the chance on you. The other thing that he talked about was really important was for many young people, especially when you're young, where he talked about getting involved in drugs or speeding tickets or getting involved with the law. And this is typically where those early mistakes when you're young can impact being able to get a good job like this individual was talking about.
plenty of young folks have intact t-shirts, clean faces, clean cars. Maybe they realize or learn that you need an apprenticeship to get licensed, says plumber Adrian Bennett.
And the apprenticeships are 5 years. And you start out at maybe $15, $16 an hour. And to get to that $40, $50 an hour, it's going to take you 5 or 6 years.
Plus,
and at the very least, I mean, if you're gonna pay a college money, and most of these colleges you're paying like 30, 40 or more a year to go to these colleges, and then you're not even guaranteed a job. I think overwhelmingly most people who go to college, when they get out of college, they don't even utilize their degree in the area of which that they went to school for. And so what's the point of going to college, paying all that money, then having to pay all that money back? All you're doing is enriching the universities, you're enriching the professors, you're enriching the people who make the books. It's just a huge business. They're just monetizing you, where at least you have the opportunity where you're getting paid on the job to learn a skill.
To get a job, isn't it who you know? And few potential candidates know tradespeople, it seems.
I didn't knew nobody.
Manuel Rios, a Mr. Rooter trainee, used to work on electric motors for $18 an hour with little prospect of making much more. But by chance, he met some plumbers there.
They said that they make a lot of money, and I realized that the plumbing is never going to end because you're always going to need a plumber. So the business is always going to be there.
It's not resetting.
The final barrier to entry in the trades is a familiar one, says electrician Lamort.
There's a certain feeling that it's kind of like a white man's game, I hate to say it. So people who are LGBTQ, minorities, are a little bit intimidated by the boys' club that exists.
And of course, women. Added together, that's about 2/3 of the country. In the late 1970s, Adrian Bennett was recruited as a union plumbing apprentice under a federal program targeting women. Similar programs exist today.
This is something that will keep food on the table. It will keep clothes on your back. It'll keep a roof over your head. I'm living proof.
Living proof as CEO of her own industrial contracting plumbing business since 2008. For the PBS NewsHour, Paul Salman.
And there's a nice little tidbit here that says there were 630,000 people in the U.S. training as an apprentice last year, right? That was back in 2020. And it says compared to around 12 million students enrolled full-time in colleges or universities. And of course, overwhelmingly, the pay for many of these individuals is typically between like 44 and about 52,000 a year. Like the video said, overwhelmingly, most of these individuals who are looking to get involved in the trades are making six figures, and it's just simple supply and demand. Unfortunately, I hope that more minorities especially become more willing to take a lot of these jobs and not be, lulled into the idea of getting an education at a university to take one of these cushy jobs that are more than likely not going to be here. Especially if you've been paying attention, many of these businesses that work in tech are basically pushing their employees to work from home. Like, for example, Salesforce. I did a video on this not too long ago. And then you have to realize at one point, if the business realizes we can send everybody home and we don't need all this office space, right? Then at what point will they then turn around and say, well, do we really need an American? Why don't we just hire somebody like all the other tech companies do, where you call up and you asking for help and you get somebody from another country, whether it's places like India or someplace else that's obviously not in the US. One of the great things about this opportunity, as expressed by the woman before, that Ms. Bennett at the end, was that she took, which is what I did myself, which is you can basically take the on-the-job experience that you learn, not just during your apprenticeship, but then after several years where you become skilled in your work, and then you can go off and create your own business, and that leads to real financial independence. It said that she had started her business back in 2008, which means according to this video, she's been doing that for the past 13 years. And that's a great way to create generational wealth.